Hello guys and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach mates. Well, tonight round 5's done and dusted, which means a very important week this year for Supercoach players with some players now gaining DPP eligibility. So also is this time to jump off some of our favourite rookies. So tonight it's just Thomas and myself. So I'm just gonna get stuck straight into it. So Dane Zorco, 500. Hang on, before we go any further, I'm going to quickly share the PowerPoint slide. Sorry. There we go. So Dane Zorco, so $519,800 is someone who's picked up defensive eligibility. High score of 133, low score of 26. If you actually take out that 26, he's averaging 101. Which I think will place him as the 15th ranked defender. Can he push into a top 6 to 8 defender this year, Thomas, or is he on your sort of a bit further back list?
He's a wait and see for me. He's done pretty well as a forward last year, so I think I got him in a week before pretty much everyone else and rode the luck. With getting Zorco, he pretty much consistently got me hundreds throughout the back end of last year. But unfortunately, I think with the defenders, there's a fair few ahead of him and Pendles, who we'll speak about in a minute, that I think might be just ahead of him. Out of Pendles and Zorco, I'd probably pick Zorco with his ceiling. But he does have the ability to put up a few stinkers and get in trouble with the MRO. So at the moment, he's the kind of wait and see. He is playing a nice role of halfback, but Cameron Coleman is yet to come back into that side. So yeah, he's a wait and see for me. But at 519, he's definitely on the cheaper end of those top end scorer defenders, which is good. But we'll just have to wait and see with that one.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much the same. I think he definitely could be a top 6 to 8 defender. But I think there are other players ahead of him, and obviously, we'll just move on to the next player now because I think he's probably going to be in the same boat. Scott Pendlebury, which is someone who I did flag a couple of weeks ago, who's also now got defensive eligibility. So I guess you know what you're going to get with Scott Pendlebury. Obviously, scoring speaks for itself. You know, pretty much been Supercoach royalty since pretty much it started. Obviously, he's getting on a bit in age, but doesn't seem to be slowing down. Can he keep this up, or is he just a bit past his best football now?
Well, I'll get you, Nathan, to speak more about him and his role in the team and all that. Being a Collingwood supporter, you've probably seen more games than I have, but he's one that's interesting. He's priced at 535, which is not the worst thing in the world at the moment. Like, you look at the guys around him, you got Sinclair, Ridley, he's gone a bit off. Sicily's now moved up into the 500, so he's maybe a bit pricey for my liking. I'm a bit concerned with his ceiling. I don't know how high he can actually get. Obviously, we've stated there he's had a high score of 124. But 530, I think, is maybe a little bit pricey for what you're paying for his scoring. I think he caps at kind of that 100, 110. Obviously, for a defender now, if you can average that for the rest of the season, he'd be a very good pickup, and he's pretty reliable, and he does play through the midfield, so he's not 100% defender. But what are your thoughts, Nathan, as obviously a Collingwood supporter?
Yeah, well, interestingly, he's actually taking a lot of our kickouts at the minute. Which obviously we love players that take kickouts, which I think is probably helping his scoring. But I guess he's someone who they can throw in the midfield. And I think champion data, I think I said right now, I think he's actually I think he might be like a top 6 general defender for the first 5 weeks, according to champion data. So, I mean, if you look at that alone, like, he's probably not actually the worst player to have in the back line. I definitely don't think you're going to get the 150s that say a Short or Aaron Hall could give you. But then again, I don't think you're probably going to get a 50 like what Jaden Short put out on the weekend, or like what Aaron Hall's put out in the past. So, I mean, in terms of that, I think it probably depends on who you've got in the back line with him. Like, I think if you've got someone who's consistent, you probably would want someone who's maybe a little bit more volatile that can give you a 150. But I think come the end of the season, I think if you're scratching around, I think he could be someone who you look at just to fill in that sixth defender spot, because you know what you're going to get with him. And he's probably not going to, he's never going to get dropped. He might get rested at some points throughout the season. But I think I think ultimately, as long as Collingwood stay in the finals race, I think he's going to keep playing. So, yeah, I think you could do worse than pick him. But I think at this stage, I think with his price being where it is, I was hoping it'd be maybe high 400s, and then I'd be a lot more interested. But I think at 535, I think Jonas's mate Dawson's a bit cheaper than that, and I think I'd be leaning towards Dawson. So, yeah, he might be a bit pricey at this stage, but if he comes down in price, I think he's someone who could be very interested in Pendlebury. So I presume is that Tristan Zeri?
Yeah, I think it's popped up on my screen, but have you moved across the slide?
Yeah, I've moved across. Have you got it?
No. Don't know what's happening at the tech department there.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, that's it. We got it.
We got it?
So, yeah.
Okay. So,
easy.
Right. So Tristan Zeri. I presume that's Tristan Zeri. Yeah, the big guy on the left there. His mouth. Yeah. Okay. So Tristan Zeri is obviously another guy who's got ruck eligibility now.
Yeah.
Can you potentially use him as your R3 and trade out Hayes for like a forward premium? Could you potentially do that? Which is actually something that I'm looking at doing.
Yeah,
what do you think?
It's an interesting one because I was meant to say ruck status, sorry, not forward status. So Sherry is playing predominantly ruck one for North Melbourne. Obviously, Goldstein's playing more forward time, which has made Sherry's ruck scores or Supercoach scores for that matter really flourish in that role. Yeah, for sure. I think if there's one player I think I want to get your opinion about, that's Brody Grundy, who seems to be struggling a little bit for around the ground, just looks a bit out of place, and that's affecting his Supercoach score. Or say, I don't know, Rowan Marshall, for example, you've kept him on, and with Paddy Ryder coming back in a week or so, that'll impact his Supercoach scoring again. Obviously, this weekend it's probably not an issue, but yeah, say if you've got an issue with your ruck, then 100% I reckon Sherry's ineligible to swing him forward, and say you might be able to get a forward premier win or the like. So definitely the flexibility is there, which is very helpful. And I guess Sherry's got a fair bit more money to make, I think. If he can maintain his consistency with his scoring and the ability to score well, is definitely what you want to do.
Yeah, just touching on Brody Grundy, I wouldn't be trading out Grundy this week. I know he's only scored 53, but I saw on Fantasy Freako that I think, for those of you guys who don't know, so Fantasy Freako is a champion data employee who is basically like does all our fantasy numbers and stuff. And I saw that they put out a tweet that said in the last 5 times that Grundy's played Essendon, he's scored 150 plus in 3 of them. So I think just hold fire with Grundy. I wouldn't be trading him out for Zeri. Yeah, I just thought I'd bring that up. If you've got Grundy and you're perhaps tossing around that, just know that Grundy does historically well against Essendon.
Yeah, I know that.
And yeah, I think that speaks for itself. I think 3 times he's got 150 plus in the last 5 games against Essendon. So, Jason Horne-Francis. So, only 39. I think it's his lowest score for the season. His break-even's now shot up to 51. Is it time to move him on, or do we think he's got some more money to make?
Who does he have coming up? I think it's a.
They've got Geelong.
Run.
They've got Geelong, and then they've got Carlton. So their next 4, so Geelong, Carlton, Freo in Perth, and Port Adelaide in Tasmania.
Yeah, I definitely think it's not the worst run in the world. He, from the looks of things, I saw that game briefly. Obviously, North Melbourne got pantsed against the Dogs, which was the same shit as last year, I think, when they got done.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so Horne-Francis is one that I think his break-even is in the 50s, which is a bit risky because he has the ability to score poorly. I think with them, it was just they got absolutely dominated. He kind of got the ball enough but butchered it, was always under pressure with the Dogs midfield dominating. I think you can afford to hold him. As I said, he's got the capabilities of scoring into 80s and 90s. If you don't have really any other problems around the field, I guess you can ship him off if you can get a premium in. But I'll be only looking to move him on if you're only able to bring in, say, a top 6 or top 8 in the respective lines. If you're bringing him in for someone that's in the 400 to 500k range that you're more of a prospective kind of pick, then I would look away and hold him for a bit because I still think he's got money to make and he just needs one big game to really rejig that cash gen.
Yeah, well, I'm just on here now on the AFL website. He had 18 disposals, which I think is a little bit down on where he has been. So I think exactly. That was just a game he had 368 metres gained. He did spend 88% of time on ground, so that is a little bit of a concern. The fact that he spent the whole time on the ground and only got 18 disposals. But then again, if you go through the total stats, they only had 288 disposals for the whole game, North Melbourne.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
they just got absolutely smashed. And I think we're going to talk about another side later on who got absolutely smashed as well. I just think that it was a bit of a one-off. They do play in Tasmania quite well historically, North Melbourne. So I'd be tempted to give him another chance. And just see how he goes. I don't think it's a high priority. But obviously, if he scores up 50 again, I think it's probably time to say goodbye to him. So Bailey Smith. So I think right now he's actually top 8 midfield on averages.
Yeah.
He's 520,000. Potential to gain forward status in the next DPP change. What do we think about Bailey Smith? I will say this now that it's just been announced today that Lockie Hunt has taken an absence of leave from the Western Bulldogs. So obviously we wish him the best. But does that change Smith's role in any way, given that Lockie Hunt is not going to be playing for the next little while?
I'm assuming that was just recently because I haven't heard of that until now.
Yeah, it was about... That story broke, I think it was sort of mid-afternoon.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting to see what happens with the Bulldog midfield. Bailey Smith, as Nathan pointed out, he's top 8 approximately in the mids. Having said that, he's played 4 games because he had, I think, an injury affected miss, so he didn't play all 5 so far, but he's dominated so far. He's scored pretty well. Can't really complain. The only knock on him is his disposal efficiency is always a bit skew-if. Tends to bomb the ball a bit forward hopelessly and not gain anything, and that's kind of shown his Supercoach scoring. He got almost 50 disposals on the weekend and scored 135. So a little bit concerning, but I guess at the end of the day, if he's scoring 130s to 140s, regardless of how many disposals he's getting, if you're getting him, you can't really complain. Yeah, that Hunter news is a little bit interesting because I wouldn't get him now hoping that Smith will get forward status. It's no guarantee. He was one of the most attended CBAs on the weekend for the Dogs mid. So it's really interesting to see. I know McRae spent a bit on the wing So whether that shifts McRae ahead of Smith, I'd be more inclined that Smith goes onto a wing more permanently now. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But I wouldn't bring him in. I know a few of our followers have messaged saying, is Smith an option at 500K? I'd be more inclined to bring in Tom Green from GWS, who we'll speak about later. But yeah, Smith, I'd say it's 520K is not a bad price for what you're paying for. But if he's pure mid, then you're stuck with him, I guess, for the rest of the season. And if he pulls out some 80s to 90s with some lower disposable games, they're not going to verse North Melbourne every week. So if that's the case, then that'd be a bit of a concern if you held him throughout the rest of the year at that price.
Yeah, I think that's the one big question mark. Is that unfortunately for the Western Bulldogs, they're not going to play North Melbourne every week. And I think the last 3 times they've played North Melbourne, I think they've won by an average of 90 points.
Exactly.
I think they won by 120 points last year on Good Friday. I think they won by about 10 goals later on in the year. And then they've won by 10 goals again. So they're not going to be able to play North Melbourne every week. But I will say his break-even this week is 45, Bailey Smith. So if you are going to bring him in, I think this is probably the last week you can jump on him. Because if he gets that, he's going to be 550K with a score of 120. So I think if you are going to get him in, I think this is the week to do it for Bailey Smith. But yeah, I think I'm like you. I think I'd rather just sit back and wait. Obviously big personality. He has taken some leave already this year, which hopefully that's the end for him. But I guess I guess he is a bit volatile maybe at this stage. He's only played 50 odd games. So I think he's done very well. But yeah, I think there could be better options at 550. But yeah, I think if you're going to bring him in, I think this is the week to do it for Mr. Bailey Smith. Moving on now, so Isaac Heaty. So another 110 on the weekend. I think he's the highest scoring forward so far. Is he a must-have now? Has he convinced you now, Thomas, that he's a must-have?
Well, I got him on pretty early, so I was lucky to get him under 500K. I got him at his starting price, so pretty happy with that so far. So I guess with him, it's probably someone you're probably going to have at some point, but I think it's probably not the worst idea to just wait and see. He'll drop a bit. I'm kind of waiting for a stinker. He's done it now 2 weeks in a row where he's pretty much had like maybe 60 to 3/4 time and then went ballistic in the last quarter and essentially got Sydney over the line pretty comfortably. So the one thing I noticed with Heaty, I haven't watched the games closely, but what I've noticed with his scoring is he gets points per disposal pretty effectively. So he doesn't really get too many disposals, but what he does with them is really effective and really impactful to the game, which definitely helps. It's a little bit concerning that Buddy's now out for a bit with his broken finger, so it means Heaty's probably going to play more forward now, and they're not going to play West Coast every week. So I'm kind of waiting for that tough game to come where Heaty doesn't really do anything, but it's shown he just bobs up and scores goals every week. So far so good for Heaty, and I think you'd want him in your final side. It's just what you're willing to pay for him.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's the highest scoring forward so far this year. So I think he's probably cemented himself as a top 6 already. But yeah, I think the price is going to be a big question mark on him if you haven't got him. So another player who's gained forward status from says Luke Parker, who's someone that I actually had a bit of a point of difference look at in the preseason. I'm glad I didn't go down that route.
Yeah.
But he's $483,000. He's dropped $108,000. Is he too inconsistent with scoring, or is he someone who might be able to pick up later on and be sort of around the top 10 forward now that he's got forward eligibility?
I know a few of my mates have picked him up in draft. He's one that's just a bit too volatile for classic. He has the ability to go absolutely berserk. So his ceiling's untappable, really. He has the ability to go 180s, as that's how ridiculous his ceiling can be. But as I've said, there is 4 scores under 80, which is the concerning part. I think his role is just very volatile. He can play that very high half forward, Heaney-esque role really well, which makes his positioning in the midfield kind of stuffed a little bit. They've got so many young midfielders going now through the midfield that I think at times he just goes missing. And he's one that can be taggable at times as well, which is a bit of a concern. At 483k, I guess, maybe if he has one more shit game and that goes further down, I wouldn't be opposed to be picking him up at low 400s. But I think with Parker, I guess the good thing is because he's forward eligible now, it makes these lower scores not as impactful as if he was pure mid. But I'd want to see some consistent runs on the board. There's a few others like Goey from Collingwood, obviously, is one that at that similar price point, a bit more consistent. There's a few other ones, Jay Gresham now, really impacting in the midfield, who we'll talk about a little bit later. And yeah, so even though he's got the forward status, Parker, I think his low score is just too low.
Yeah, I think so too. I had a look here. It's a bit concerning. And he got 167 in round 1 and still went down after round 3 in price.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's a little bit concerning for me with his scoring. But obviously, yeah, he scores well, but yeah, I think he's a little bit too thing for me. So moving on. So Jay Gresham, who we've touched on already. So he's only had one score under 100, another 117 on the weekend. Is this guy someone who we all missed out on? I have to say I did have him in my side pretty much right up until round 1. And then I had to get rid of him to fix up, I think, the back line, which was just bereft of rookies, and it still pretty much is. But he's one that I wish I'd kept. But I think he just got squeezed out for me. But to be honest with you, I'm not surprised that he's done this, because this is what St Kilda supporters, I'm sure you're in the same boat, but this is what St Kilda supporters have been crying out for him to be able to do now for pretty much, 3-4 years now, which is to add that speed around the stoppage, and then someone who can go forward and impact on the scoreboard, which has probably been the one thing that St Kilda's really been missing, is that sort of Dustin Martin, DeGoey type player, which I think Gresham's lining up to be. So obviously I'll let Thomas talk more. But yeah, I think for me, he was someone that I did have in my radar, and he just got squeezed out towards the end. But you must be impressed, Thomas, being a Saints man, how well he started the season.
Yeah, 100%. He's basically reinvigorated his career in some regards. Was injury prone the last 2 seasons, so hopefully continues his excellent form into this season. He provides a lot of energy, both mid and forward, and he's starting to clean up his disposal, which is excellent to see. I'm kind of a bit bummed as well, because I had him in my starting lineup and got a little bit cold feet on him after hearing his people saying, he'll line up more forward, and with his Achilles issues, they'll ease him into it, and he goes bang first round against Collingwood. Granted, he had a poor second round, even though he won. He scored 50 odd, but ever since then he's been scoring hundreds, and more importantly, he hasn't looked back and looks really consistent at midfield. He pushes forward and he impacts the contest as well. He pretty much always scores and bobs up. So he's one player that we've been crying out for, as you said, as a kind of X factor in that midfield, which has really helped. Obviously, Sinclair in there as well with really elite disposal efficiency has been really useful for our midfield as well. And he's, I think, priced at 415k now. So it's really one that, you could even jump on the boat now and say, hey, he's going to end up as a top 6-4. That'd be a pretty ballsy move. But we've got Billings back. I think he's re-injured his hamstring, so he's a bit of a while. I know Zach Jones was going to come back this Friday night, I think, apparently. But he's now entered COVID protocol, so he'll miss another week, which is probably not the worst thing in the world to give him another rest. But yeah, Gresham's one that I think you could bring him in now and say, look, he's going to be a top 6 to 8 forward, or you might wait a bit more longer and just see how he goes against maybe a bit tougher opposition. As people on social media have said, that even though we're 4-on-1 at the moment, we haven't really versed anyone too amazing. So it'd be really interesting to see how he goes maybe against the GWS, which is will be a much more contested game for sure. But I like the look at him at the moment.
Yeah, look, I'm just having a look now. So he's actually number 10 for the forwards at the minute, Gresham. So I definitely, it might sound crazy, but I think if you haven't got, I think we might touch on this guy again. He's just killing me every week just watching him get 130. But I think if you don't have George Hewitt and you're looking for a defender, I don't think he's too bad a pickup, and I think Gresham's in the same boat now. Well, I think he's shown that he's got a clear role in that St Kilda lineup. I know some people might say St Kilda haven't played anyone, but I know Champion Data have rated St Kilda extremely highly throughout the first 5 rounds. I think they've said right now, I think St Kilda are about the 4th best side on defending turnover. So I think that's just, I think that's a credit to Braddon that he was able to sort of flick some magnets after that first half against Collingwood. And ever since then, I think they've probably been playing like a top 4, top 6 side. So, look, I'm not a big fan of these people who say, they haven't played anyone yet. I think it's more so about your system and the way that you play, which we might touch on that with another side. But, I think Gresham, he has a clear role in that side. And I think so far he's playing that to full effect. So, I think as long as he doesn't get injured, I can see him keep scoring these sort of 100+ scores and, cementing himself as a bit of an X factor in that St Kilda midfield. So moving on to the rookies. So I've just had to check this guy's name. So his name is Malcolm Rosas, who's $130,600 forward, who's on the bubble this week. Is he a rookie to bring in this week? And if so, are there any rookies who we should perhaps look at getting rid of to bring him in?
Malcolm Rosas was one that I have a bit of history with last year. I brought him in after 1 week as a potential rookie who might do quite well, and he blew up in my face and never got picked again at Gold Coast. So he's kind of reinvigorated himself. He's put a bit of size on as well, and he looks quite damaging. He scored 73 and 75 or something like that in his first 2 games, which is definitely not the worst scores in the world. And with those 2 scores in your system, you're going to get some cash regardless. I think he's playing that half forward role, small forward role quite well, definitely impacting the contest. So I think he's one that if you have to pick one, he's probably the pick of the bunch. I know Marcus Windhager from the Saints is on the bubble, but he scored pretty poorly. He's looked all right as a footballer, but Supercoach wise just hasn't reached the heights yet. So I don't think he's one of an option, but he's Malcolm Rosas as well as Braden Pruce, the kind of these rookie options. With Rosas, there's probably a few you can go for. Obviously, Matt Rowell is a bit of a concern at the moment. So he's one that, you could potentially go all the way down and bring up. You've got Jared Berry, who looks like he's stagnated in price a bit, stagnated in scoring. You've got Dylan Stevens, who's not getting a game. So guys like that you want to bring in. But, Rosas, I think, is going to make you a bit of cash. I don't exactly know how well his job security will be long-term wise, but I think the short-term gain, you want to get this cash in. There's not too many rookies on the horizon, unfortunately, that look quite good. And he's one that I think you want to take these 270s and enjoy the price rise.
Yeah, I think it's getting to that time now where there are some rookies who might be sort of near the top end of their price, or they're not getting picked. I think Stevens is one who you could look at trading in if you can sort of do a bit of DPP manoeuvring there. I still don't mind the Josh Shelley trade. I know he's break-even 6. So he's probably still got another week left in him. But I think he's someone who we should be looking at getting in. But it's just a question of who to get it. And we'll just touch on this guy because I think this is now becoming a bit of a pity thing for Thomas, just watching Jack Sinclair get 115 every week. Another 110 score. He's now, I think, the fourth highest ranked defender after the first 5 weeks. What are you doing with him, Thomas? Is he too high at 550, or are you going to eat your pride and just bring him in?
I think unfortunately I took that spot away, and that I traded in Doherty this week, so it was a bit annoying because Doherty didn't see much ball when Port was the Blues were smashing up on Port. But yeah, Sinclair is one that definitely could come in with a bit of DPP. I think I've talked him up enough that I might just have to get him. This is probably the last that you probably should get him in. I think if you have to wait another week and he goes to 570, you're paying significantly overs for him, I think, when he started off as 460 as a bit of a speculative pick. I know that the knock on him at the moment is people are saying, oh, well, we've got Zach Jones coming back into the side. Hunter Clark is about a week away or so from that got that collarbone issue. Well, the game they played against the Gold Coast, I watched a little bit of it whilst I was on holiday, and he did play significant time in the back line off half back, and I think that was because Jimmy Webster was out with COVID protocols. So he took that role, and you could see that he pushes well up. He's elite by foot and by hand, and he still scored 130. So 135 actually was our highest score on the day. So he's one of those players I think he's just going to score consistently regardless. He's not going to have a quiet game. It definitely helps that Brad Hill is playing this high half forward role now, and Sinclair's basically the general down back, similar to Short, where the ball just goes through him naturally because he's so elite by foot. But I think Sinclair's now the time that you have to buy him is probably now. I think you can't wait any longer. If not, I think you just have to wait for a poor score and he drops again. I wouldn't be surprised if these 80s and 90s come eventually. As I've said, similarly with Gresham, we haven't played the most amazing opposition yet. So, a heavily contested game could say otherwise with his scoring. But this is the week I think you have to get him if you need a defender spot. If not, you might have just to wait until either he's consistently scoring, hundreds for fun every week, and you just have to get him at a D1 kind of talking point. Otherwise, just wait a bit and he'll drop again for sure.
Yeah, I think he's sort of taken over a bit from Brad Hill. I think he's sort of the player now that St Kilda look to get the ball in the hands of off the back of the stoppage. He's sort of playing a bit like the quarterback. Well, they sort of start him off the back of the contest, and he sort of runs through as a bit of a quarterback role. And I think for St Kilda, I think it's working out because I think Brad Hill, you want Brad Hill to be the last kick inside 50. And I think Sinclair's another really good kick, who I think is maybe a little bit younger, a little bit more agile, and maybe a little bit less noticeable. Like he's sort of not going to attract the crowd as much as what Brad Hill does, because it's sort of got to a point where sides would just know, okay, well, it's open play, so Brad Hill's going to get the ball here. Whereas I think by moving Hill forward, I think it's sort of helped him out because I think he's a little bit less taggable in that role. And I think Sinclair is sort of a little bit more of a quiet achiever. He's pretty much doing the same thing. So, I think that move has definitely helped St Kilda. And yeah, I think I'm with you. I don't think I can bring him in at that price, but I think if you are, I think this is the week to do it. So Jaden Short, so I did flag this a few weeks ago, and he finally pulled out a 56. 0 touches in the last quarter. Richmond basically got destroyed at stoppage. Obviously, this has always been a knock on Short, is he scores 120, 130, but he doesn't mind throwing out a 70 or 60 or even in this case a 50. Does this concern you at all, Thomas, going forward?
Not really. The only reason I say that is because he's so popularly owned. I don't think he'll do this on a regular basis. I think just with the nature of the game, him and Rioli really didn't get the halfback role going too well. it really wasn't played on Richmond's terms at all throughout this game, and Adelaide pretty much dominated for the majority of the game. But I think, you'll get these odd shit games from short, but you'll get it with every player. You can't expect every single player to score 100, especially in the defence for the full 22 games. So I wouldn't be too concerned. If he does it, maybe 3 to 4 weeks in a row, you'd 100% be concerned. He does have some history of this where he goes quiet in patches, so hopefully this isn't a reoccurring theme. But I think we've had a pretty good run with short so far, and I think he'll bounce back and hopefully for Richmond's case, he will be, because he's such an important defender for them. He provides a lot of rebound for them, and it just looked like they weren't getting that rebound against Adelaide.
No, well, they weren't able to. So, yeah, obviously, I wouldn't be too concerned if you've got short, but yeah, it's definitely something that I think you just got to be prepared with. That he can sort of but I did see on here that he sort of can get these low scores. I'm on here now. I did see only went at 77. He only went at 78% efficiency as well. So that probably didn't help his scoring either. Normally, I think he'd be someone who's sort of probably around the 80, 90 mark. You might be able to help me a bit better on that, Thomas. He's sort of someone who's...
Yeah, he's usually someone that's...
Yeah, so the fact that someone who's down at 78%, I think he just had an off day like all of Richmond did. So I wouldn't be too concerned there. The other one who's interesting, Ben Keys, who I think surprised a lot of people, but I'm not really sure if we should be that surprised, because he sort of did this a little bit last year as well, Ben Keys. Obviously maybe not as well, and maybe being outside the Melbourne bubble. Maybe doesn't get the attention that he probably deserves, but another 100+ score on the weekend. He's averaging 121 across the first 5 rounds, which right now is the number 6 ranked midfielder. Can he keep this up? And is he someone who we should be looking at getting into our sides? Right now, it's only 2.8% of sides. So if you're one of the 2.8% of players that have him, well done to you. But is he someone who everyone else can jump on at some point later on in the year, given that Sloane's not there now as well?
Yeah, I think he's one that's gone under the radar a bit with the likes of, your McRae, Steele, Took Millers, those of the sort. He's just pumping out consistent scoring. He's one of the most consistent midfielders in the comp at the moment. His tackle pressure's up. He's a very Jack Steele-esque player where he can score through tackling his defensive pressure. Obviously, unfortunately, Sloane got an ACL, so he was out for the rest of the season. Unfortunately, I just think that will help Keys be that number 1 midfielder for alongside Crouch and Laird. I think Laird is the one that's a bit more taggable in a sense. Even Crouch might cop some attention, but I think Keys is a more defensively minded midfielder in that 3, similar to George Hewitt from Carlton. So, yeah, I can't see him, being a bad pick. Whether he consistently can get you maybe 120s is a bit of a concern, that he might be someone that at the moment is scoring pretty well, but he can throw in some low hundreds, which I guess is maybe a little bit of a concern. But if you're not scoring under 100 at all, you'd be laughing if that was the full 22 rounds, which would be an amazing feat. But with Keys, I think he's just going to score consistently, and that's what you want in this season. And I don't think it's a bad pickup, but someone you'd be pretty brave to pick up at 2.9% owned. But he's one that you can't really go wrong with the pick. There's not much downside to his pick, I think, with Keys.
Yeah, I just had a look on here. I'm on here now again on the AFL. So he had 6 tackles. So that sort of backs up. That's a game high, by the way, equal game high with Jack Graham. So I think that sort of backs up what you're saying about his tackle pressure around the contest. And the other thing too, his disposal efficiency was only 65%. So if he can clean that up, if he cleans that up, that goes from, I don't know, what did he get on the weekend? It was 106. So, that goes up to about 130 if that's sort of around the 70-80% disposal efficiency mark. So I don't think it's the worst pick. I think at that price, though, he's probably maybe if he was still at his starting price, I'd be a lot more open to the idea. But I don't think he's the worst pick at this stage of the season. I'll say that. Moving on. So Petrarca, so 575k, I think might be just about a bargain by that price. Is he someone who if you're looking to upgrade for midfielders, this just someone who just straight go to, just no one else this week? Is he your number one target as a midfielder upgrade?
Yeah, I'm looking at him pretty heavily at the moment. I'm looking to ship off Raul. He's been very, very disappointing for, I guess, everyone so far. Petrarca's one that the ability to obviously go 160s, no problems, but he has the ability to have some stinkers, being taggable as well. I think him and Oliver have the tendency to go a bit shit sometimes. Having said that, 575 is pretty cheap for someone like Petrarca. But I guess, what are your thoughts before I have a bit of a chat about Tom Green? If you had to pick between the two, I know Tom Green started off the season at a lower price, but he's been pretty much GWS's number one midfielder. Who would you pick between the two of them?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think I'm just on this. So Petrarca's break even's 132, so you could probably hold another week on Petrarca. And hope he doesn't go gangbusters. I don't know who Melbourne have this week. They have Richmond actually this week.
Yeah, it could be quite dangerous.
He doesn't mind performing on the big stage. So, I think based on I think you would have to lean towards Petrarca, given where the lists are. But that's not discrediting Tom Green. I think we're going to talk about him right now. He's pretty much keeping GWS's season alive. I think he's the only player at that club who can probably hold his head high and say, yeah, you know what, I've probably improved on last year. I think pretty much everyone else has gone backwards. But I guess the one question mark on Tom Green, and it's been mentioned down here, is there's still the Toby Green factor, which that will be answered this week, which I think we'll find out what Tom Green's role is. And if he's still getting these same midfield minutes and he's still getting, these 100+ scores that he's been so good at getting, I'd almost consider switching them around, in all honesty, because I think there's going to be less competition at the Giants with scoring. And I think Tom Green's only going to get better. He's been someone who I think was a top 6 pick. I think most recruiters said he should have been number 1, and he fell a little bit because he had he was from the Giants Academy. So the potential's there, and I think we're starting to see it now. So, I think at this stage, based on exposed form, you'd say Petrarca, but Tom Green has looked really impressive over the first 5 weeks.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I could just see Green's scoring potential increasing with Toby Green coming back. It just means that I think Tom Green plays a bit predominantly more midfield and just basically becomes the number one midfielder for GWS. I think Kelly's now moved predominantly on a wing. It probably hinders Taranto, if anything, that they'll rotate between Taranto and Toby Green. But I think, Toby Green, unfortunately for St Kilda's sake, comes back this Friday night, so it'll be interesting. But, I think Tom Green, you can't go wrong with him at 550k. He's shown now that he's got this consistent scoring in his ability. Whether or not that translates to a top 8-10 mid is yet to be seen throughout the course of a 22 game season, but you can't go wrong with this pick. But before we move on to the next, the Sunday's games, I'll ask you, Nathan, Stephen May is a defender that obviously Melbourne supporters know how well he does. Last line of defence so many times with Jake Lever, but only one score under 100, and that was in round 1. And since then, he hasn't looked back and scored another 124 against GWS. And Melbourne just look like pummeling every team they come up against. What are your thoughts on May as a bit of a POD if you're looking for someone this week in the defender category?
Well, I just want to start by talking about when you play against Melbourne. Okay, so for goodness sake, if you play against Melbourne, the one thing that you can't let them do is to leave Stephen May loose behind the ball. Because honestly, if you let them play a +1 behind the ball, he right now is the best defender at setting up Melbourne, and he's a really, really strong leader down in that back line. So, I almost want to see someone like a Brody Mychek or someone like that actually be given the role, like what Mychek did on McGovern, sort of a few seasons ago, where someone gets sent to him and says, right, you stay on him and don't let him go as a +1, and everyone else folds up and sort of plays man on man. But right now, yeah, Melbourne right now look like pummeling just everyone that they play. And I think that's a big reason why, because they let Stephen May play as a +1 behind in the back line, and he's just too good at setting up. And Melbourne's system right now is just better than anyone else's, except for one side, on turnover. And yeah, I just think that if sides actually caught onto this instead, the amount of times, I think Stephen May had like 8 marks in the first quarter or something ridiculous. So
Yeah.
I just want to see a side actually just say, you know what, we're not going to let you go a +1 behind the ball, and we're actually going to make that Melbourne backline accountable. But at this stage, you can only go off exposed form, and at this stage, yeah, he's definitely someone who I think you should be looking at, given that I think sides are just going to keep letting him be that +1, crazily enough. And I think as long as he keeps being allowed to be the +1, I think he's going to keep scoring these 120, 130 points. And I think he's just going to keep rising. So I don't think he's the worst pick. But yeah.
The other thing is he takes kickouts, I'm pretty sure, which obviously helps his scoring as well. So.
Yeah, and he's a good intercept marker. But yeah, I just want to see, like, even this week, I just want to see, I don't know who can do it at Richmond, but I just want to see even Noah Bolter, just you go to Noah Bolter and just say, right, you're going to be our Stephen May player. You just stay on him. Don't let him be a +1 behind the ball. And make them accountable in the forward line. In their back 100%. Line. Because the amount of times you watch them, they just fall back, and sides they can't deal with the Melbourne pressure. And obviously, if you're under pressure, you're just going to bomb the ball long. And obviously, if you're going to bomb the ball long, well, guess who's the loose man? And it's Stephen May, and he's just marking everything at the minute. So if you actually send someone to him and say, well, we're not going to let you get those cheap marks, I'd be interested to see what happens with his scoring, and I'd be interested to see what happens with Melbourne's system. But yeah, right now you can't argue with what he's done and what Melbourne are doing. So yeah, I don't think he's the worst pick.
100%.
So moving on now, so Sunday game. So Sam Walsh, so 38 disposals, 128. Can you bring him back in off 2 games, or this might even be his 3rd game? And does Cripps reduce his scoring? Well, I don't think Cripps reduces his scoring, but I think the addition of Hewitt and Chera might be a little bit of a problem for him, because I think he's now, last season he was sort of doing a bit of inside and outside. Whereas this year, because they've got Hewitt and Chera, and they've got Kennedy's been playing really well, he's sort of a bit more of a luxury player for them to go inside, and they can really use his running power out on the wing. But obviously, out on the wing, sometimes he can go missing. So, I don't think he's the worst pickup, but I think he's a wait and hold for me. And I think the other reason why he's a wait and hold is I think he's break even this week. I had a look at this before. I should know this. His break even is 124. So you can probably get one more look at him. But yeah, he's ultra consistent. It's just a question mark of, I guess, what's Carlton going to do with this? What's his role going to look like once they've got their full complement of midfielders?
Yeah, 100%. I just think that, he hasn't really shown back-to-back great scoring. 38 disposals is a lot of touches for a score of 128. So I think he's not the worst pickup in the world, but me personally, I've already got Hewitt, Doherty, and Cripps in my team. So bringing in another Carlton player might be a bit overkill as well with regards to buys and COVID stuff. So I think with him, I might just have to pass up on him for the time being until I can see more consistent scoring from him. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got Cripps, so I don't think I could bring him in, but I don't think he's the worst pick. Sam Hayes, so 75. I think it was his first game, and he got the number one ruck spot. Can you bring him in 2 weeks' time if you don't get Braden Bruce this week? I'm actually hoping that Bruce doesn't get picked this week, given that Flynn actually did all right against Melbourne.
All right, yeah.
I'm actually hoping that they give Bruce another week in the VFL, and just make him earn his spot back rather than just walking straight back in. But I think if you've got Bruce and Hayes, I think I'd still be going Bruce just. Even though I think Hayes has better, at least short-term job security. But I don't think you could go wrong with picking him. I presume we're all about the same on that wavelength.
Yeah, he's one that obviously not going to pick up this week because who knows with him. I only had the 5 disposals, and I think his work around the ground tap work wise was pretty impressive to get 75. I didn't watch the game, so I can't really give much on that. But I just saw it. He doesn't really rack up the most disposals on the ground. But yeah, fine, because obviously if you think about it, if you don't have, maybe if Bruce was your R2 for now, obviously Hayes comes into the conversation and almost a must-have R3, because I think with the Lyset injury going on for a while, I think it definitely helps Hayes' job security for the short term, and his scoring as a ruckman, he's going to score enough that it's going to make enough money. The conversation really is to be had if you've got your Grundy-Gorn combo or a Max Gorn Darcy combo, Marshall combo, whatever, more to higher price ruckman, and you only have the R3 spot, and obviously Bruce and Hayes both only have ruck eligibility. There's no forward swing, so you can only really have the one of them. I think if Bruce comes in this week, I think you just have to take Bruce. I think the silver lining, even with Flynn doing pretty well against a Melbourne duo, I think that because GWS got belted will help Bruce's stocks come back into the side. But I think it's one that I think if Bruce comes in, you probably just got to take it because he's got back-to-back tons, and I think you just can't miss out on the price rise. Yeah, as Nathan said, if Bruce makes a VFL return again or another VFL game, it will definitely help. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. But I think for now, Hayes, unfortunately, I think if you've got the ability where you only have to have one R3 spot, probably Bruce edges Hayes out in that conversation.
Yeah, and I think the other reason why I'm hoping Bruce doesn't get picked is your mate Jack Hayes at St Kilda's probably got another 50k to make. So I'm hoping that
exactly.
he can get another 100. Ryder comes back in, he gets dropped, and then that's it for Hayes. But I guess the other thing you've got to realise too, so with Sam Hayes, is that Carlton actually, I think they had no ruckman. Like their number one ruckman didn't play.
I'm pretty sure Pitney played.
Did he? I thought he was injured.
No, let me double. He was injured the last one. I'm pretty sure he came back. That's why they were so dumb. Yeah, Pitney did play. 27 hitouts.
Okay, I'll scrap that
Sam
then.
Hayes had 20. So he definitely, Hayes equaled Pitney, which is not the worst. So he can show he can ruck. But yeah.
Yeah, no, never mind that. I just thought Pitney was injured, so maybe that might have been that. I will just give a shout out here. So this is a bit off topic here. We might talk about him later on. I'll just give a shout out to my mate George Hewitt, who got another 111 on the weekend. And right now, that trade to Whitfield a few weeks ago is looking better and better every week. Because right now he's actually the number one ranked defender in the game.
Yeah, it's
Hewitt. So I definitely wouldn't have picked that after 5 weeks, having someone that's 400k be the number one ranked player in defence. But yeah, I guess if you're one of the ones who started with Hewitt or you jumped on him before his price rised, I think well done to you. And I'm just sitting back every week just watching him score 100, 120s and just watching Whitfield score 70s and just wondering what could have happened if I had have done that trade.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so I'm going to talk about so Darcy Parish. So can you bring him in as a midfield upgrade? I said this, so I actually watched a little bit of this game, and where are Essendon? Like, this is a side who a lot of people had definitely being a top 8 side. Some people even had a top 4 side. And right now, according to Champion Data, they are the easiest side to play against in the AFL. In terms of, they just don't have a system behind the ball. Their contest work isn't that great. So there's going to be question marks about, I think there's going to be question marks about pretty much any Essendon premium this year. There was this one thing I saw with Parish, he just didn't want to run defensively.
Yeah, that's what I noticed.
So like they're going to be better than that, but like I don't know where I sit with Essendon and bringing players. I just don't know what they're going to put out every week. They're a bit of a flaky side for mine, Essendon, but if Parish can keep scoring, he could be an upgrade. But that's probably looking at Essendon more from a general perspective, more so for Supercoach. He's priced at. Let me get him up
now. 581. So he's also someone that's dipped off a little bit.
Okay, yeah. So he's 581. His break even's 102. So if you are going to get him, I think this is probably the week to get him, and he doesn't mind an Anzac Day game. Darcy Parish.
That's what I was just about to say.
Obviously, destroyed Collingwood on Anzac Day last year, won the medal. But yeah. I guess it's just a question mark of what type of Essendon's going to turn up. If the Essendon from 2021 turns up, yes, I think you can pick him. If the Essendon we've seen so far in 2022, you'd be hard pressed. But that's just my thoughts. Have you got a different, or are you on the same wavelength?
Yeah, I didn't actually realise it was only 580k. He definitely enters the conversation. I think he's. I do agree with what you've said. I heard some conversations on the AFL website. I know Matthew Lloyd mentioned on the AFL website saying that Darcy Parish wasn't really earning his possessions defensively. He just really wanted to get the hands around the ball and not do much with it. But I guess for Supercoach-wise, he's still going to score your points. He dominated the first half and then fell away when Essendon fell away as well. And as you said, doesn't mind an Anzac Day match. So could it be the week that Darcy Parish goes 160 and goes bananas against Collingwood again? Who knows? But he's one that, he's one that I think is definitely interesting because, we saw it last year where as soon as he played that Anzac Day game, he went gangbusters afterwards, and so did Essendon as well. And they really climb back up the ranks into finals contentions. I don't think it'll be this year with Essendon. I think there's a few issues off field as well within the coaching ranks. But he's definitely an upgrade target for sure. That I think you wouldn't be too crazy to pick him, and I think he's definitely going to reward you pretty comfortably with some nice scoring. But we'll move on to Andy Brayshaw. I want your opinions on this, Nathan. Scored a 132 against Essendon. Essendon really didn't pay much attention to him, unfortunately. And he paid them big time against him. But is the susceptibility of the tag a bit of an issue with Brayshaw? We've seen it now twice that when he gets tagged, he scores under 100, but when he doesn't, he basically scores above 130. So What are your thoughts around Andy Brayshaw, and can you pick him with the confidence of being in top 8 to 10 midfielder?
Well, I think based off pure talent alone, yes, I think you can pick him off pure talent as being a top 8 midfielder. But there's two questions. There is that question of the tag, and I actually wouldn't be surprised if Carlton actually sent George Hewitt to him this weekend. Maybe not as a full around the ground tag, but just to sort of keep a check on him at stoppages, just to make him accountable there. And obviously at some stage, one Nat Fyfe is going to come back into this Fremantle side. And sort of how does that impact Brayshaw? But at this stage, he's putting the runs on the board, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's flying like the rest of Freo. I think right now, Fremantle are actually the number one side in the league. If you look at it from a turnover perspective, which is astonishing. I think their like differential is like plus 188 points on turnover. Which after 5 rounds is just unheard of. They're actually number one in that stat, so they're actually even better than Melbourne at turnover game, and Melbourne are just tearing sides apart. So that says how well Fremantle are going at the minute. And look, I think they've all sort of got on board. They've sort of been a bit of a slow build, and I think now they're reaping the benefits of, having some consistent players. I think they've got a really good system at the minute that's, Champion Data are rating them, I think, as the second best side in the league at the minute. So,
Yeah.
I think a bit like Jay Gresham at St Kilda, I think as long as their system stands up, which so far it's proven to stand up across the first 5 weeks, I think he's going to sort of keep getting these good scores. But yeah, I think the only question mark is going to be the tag. But in terms of his role is as safe as houses in that Freo side. So, Will Brodie. Now, if I told you that Will Brodie was going to be after round 5, if you came up to me and said that Will Brodie's the 4th highest ranked forward, I would have laughed you out of the league or out of Supercoach. But right now, he's the 4th highest ranked forward. So, obviously, if you haven't got him, can you pick him up as a keeper? And if you've already got him, like most of, I think 50% of sides have him, can you keep him? Which is amazing considering the fact that I think Jonas and I were talking a couple of weeks ago about him being our first upgrade, which I think that's sort of been put to the burners the last couple of weeks. What do you think about keeping Will Brodie in the forward line?
Yeah, unfortunately, Nathan and Jonas, the 2 out of the 3 that have him, I don't have him, unfortunately, which has really burnt me. He was one that I just couldn't fit in structure-wise, and I had my doubts, and he's killed me. It seems like after that 130 game, he's basically been a shoe-in into the midfield as an on-baller permanently, and His around the ground contest work has been really impressive from what we've heard from the Fremantle coaching staff. And he just continues to impress. He was on 35 at halftime and ended up on a score of 94. So obviously Freo smashed up Essendon in the second half. So that's got something to do with it as well. But you can't complain with what he's producing at the moment. And you picked him up at 200K pretty much, 220K. So really, really can't complain with that much. And it's funny to think that at the start of the season, you could pick 4 out of your 6 forward line players as sub 300K players, and they are pretty much in the conversation of top 10 forwards. Is pretty ridiculous. So, and they don't look like slowing down at the moment for sure. You got Cogs. I think it was Cogs, Brodie, Sherry, Gresham.
All of them are flying at the minute. All of them are flying.
Ridiculous. So if I had my time again, I think Mitch McGovern would be Will Brodie for sure. But yeah, if you have him, keep him. There's no need to trade him. As we've been saying, there's even potential they could end up being top 6 to 10 forward, which is ridiculous. I'm still waiting for the time that he slows down and kind of burns everyone eventually, but I don't think that time's going to come very soon. And I think Freo have now given him the reins to play on ball more persistently than ever.
Well, I mean, I think he's done his job.
Oh yeah.
He's done his job now. But this is my certainty for this week. So any tipsters out there backing Fremantle this week, they will beat Carlton this week. That's a big call, but they will beat Carlton this week. You can put that one to the house. Right, so we're going to start off with James Sicily. So this is again someone else who some people had some doubts about. And right now, if you actually had Sicily and George Hewitt in your starting sides, you'd actually have, I think, 2 of the top 6 defenders. So Hewitt's 1, Sicily is 5. If you had both of them at the start, well done to you. So another 126 on the weekend, break even to 54. He's now above 500,000. What are your thoughts on Sicily? Like, is he someone who we should be looking to bring in as a top 6 defender, or is there some question marks still?
Yeah, I mean, he's one that was always someone that I was kind of like, do I pick him, do I not? He probably, realistic speaking, he had the runs on the board prior to his ACL. I think we know how talented the man he is, and there was always that conversation that will Sam Mitchell place him up forward as Alistair Clarkson would often do on a random occasion. But I think he's safe as houses down back. What I noticed against Geelong, he was basically the +1 intercept king down there. He'd be basically playing last line of defence, getting that kick into him, and he'd be always the guy that the Hawks defenders would look to pass him to. I don't think Will Day's return, even though he got knocked out against St Kilda and missed the Queen's birthday, missed this Easter Monday clash, I don't think that's got too much affection on Sicily's scoring. I think you might want to wait and see whether the whole conglomerate of Hawthorn defenders, so your likes of Hardwick, Impey, Day and Scrimshaw, which are probably one of the first times next week that they might play all together in that defensive line. Does that mean that Sicily may have to be a bit more, there might be a bit more ownership on his one-on-one work is yet to be seen. Didn't help that Geelong basically just gave him the ball on a string pretty much in the first half. So I think we're not going to see necessarily your 130s pluses like we sometimes see with the likes of Doherty, Sinclair at the moment, but he's very consistent. At 500 is probably your last week that you're wanting to bring him in. Unfortunately for non-owners that don't have him, but I know Nathan's one of the lucky owners that brought him in at the start. Yeah, stuck back with him alongside Tom Stewart, and you'd be reaping the rewards. It's pretty crazy to think that if you had Sinclair, Hewitt, and Sicily, paying under 500k for all 3 of them is pretty ridiculous. That's half your defence done with under sub 500 players, but I mean, you couldn't predict that now, but yeah, pretty crazy to think that they're all now in the conversation of top 6 to 10 defenders.
Yeah, we'll just take a little bit of cover there because I'm pretty sure that he actually made up on Jeremy Cameron.
Yeah, he was playing. Yeah, he's playing on Jezza. So.
He was playing on Jeremy Cameron, and he still got 126. So, I think his role is probably the safest one out of all the Hawthorn defenders. I mean, right now they're flying. Like, I think a lot of people had Hawthorn being a potential wooden spooner this year, and right now they're flying. So I think the last thing they'd want to do is make Sicily accountable, given how damaging he is with his kicking. So I think his role is pretty safe to sort of stay the same. I can't see them changing it too much. I think he's probably their most important player off the back line. And yeah, I think that they don't probably want to clamp him down and sort of have him play more one-on-one. I think they'd rather avoid that if they can. Obviously, there might be a time they need to. But someone else who's impressed is Dylan Moore, who I had to actually look up. I can't believe that he hasn't scored under 90. He's 466,000. He's in 947 sides at the minute, which is less than 1%. Is he a valid point of difference, or is it a bit of a small forward curse here?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I'm just looking through his stats now. So he scored 4 goals against Geelong. He pretty much got to his 80 at halftime and then faded away. So that's a bit of a blip in the radar. But yeah, Hawthorn against St Kilda, he scored 14 disposals, 5 frees, 4 tackles, 2 goals, 105. And then looking back, we'll go one more. Round 3 against Carlton. Again, he scored 2 goals and scored 94. The impressive thing is he's not relying on huge bags to score goals. If there was every round he was scoring 4 goals, which basically means he gets these 4 goals and that basically counts for his 90 points. The impressive thing is he's getting 2 goals a game and still scoring 100, which is pretty impressive. He's still getting his 20 disposals as a forward. He's one that I probably don't have the balls for as a forward. He's one that you probably needed to start with for whatever reason, if you're a Hawks fanatic or had some inside information about how well he's going. But he's pretty much their number one forward player for the Hawks. He's just always bobbing up, putting ridiculous amounts of pressure on his opponent, and he gets rewarded for it. So, yeah, he's one that maybe you want to see 8-game sample size, how he goes. At the moment, we're still looking at a pretty small game sample size of only 5 games. But yeah, he's been more than impressive, and I think it's a big reason why the Hawks forward line is done so well is because they're not relying on their tall forwards having dominate through the air. And I think when your small forwards are doing well, it's a good sign that your team's ticking along pretty nicely.
Yeah, I think I'm the same on that. I will say, though, that I think credit's got to be given to Sam Mitchell here for the way he's coached his Hawthorn side. I think there are a lot of question marks about, Clarkson's gone. Can Mitchell do the same thing? And I think he's probably arguably made them a better side offensively.
Better side, yeah, I agree.
So, yeah.
I think that's wrapped it up for another bumper round 5. Been a pretty rough couple weeks for us personally. I think, Nathan, have you got exited out of that PowerPoint side? Just bring it back to the regular. There we go. Yeah, so been a pretty rough week for all of us. I think we scored. I think Nathan was the top scorer this week with 2140 or something like that.
Oh, goodness. I thought I had a whole week.
Jonas took his holiday at the right time. He suffered a fair bit with a 2030 or something like that. And I put my hand up for not fielding Nathan O'Driscoll, even though I was meant to, and then just had a brain fade and forgot to put him on. So that cost me about 60 points. So yeah, it's one that I guess it's a long season, and hopefully we'll bounce back. And I think we're all pretty close in the rankings, which tells you how similar most Supercoach teams are going at the moment.
Just before we go, because I think we're pretty much done, I will just give a shout out to Zach Butters here, who pretty much turned his scoring around in the second half. Got 130. So I think that's a lesson learned that, you can have a couple of bad games, but he was pretty much Port Adelaide's best player in that second half, and almost pretty much, along with Rosie, got them over the line against that Carlton side. So hopefully he's back now. Somehow he's still the 7th ranked forward across the season, despite those 2 scores. So I guess maybe that's a lesson learnt that it's maybe wise to hold your trades and just wait 100%. And see. Because I think if you kept him, I think he looked back in that second half. So hopefully he can continue that. And I was unfortunate to have the captaincy on Brodie Grundy. Only 53. If I had had it on literally anyone else,
you would have
had over 2,200. Like if I put it on Jack McRae, I would have got another 100 points. So there's always that. So you live and learn. But Thursday night football. God, it's horrible. Thursday night
Yeah,
football.
it's pretty frustrating, I think. But
Yes.
just before we wrap it up, give a shout out to, we've got in our small Supercoach group, I think there's about 100 odd in there. The Killer Kitties, Catherine is still, after 5 rounds, still at number 1, which is quite impressive.
Is she?
Yeah, so pretty impressive. Still stuck at number 1. Scored a pretty healthy 23.64 this round,
Oh, goodness.
which has done pretty well so far. So hopefully she can continue a good run of form. And obviously, if you want to get in contact with us, we're more than happy to have you on the podcast to see how you managed to do so well up until now, and hopefully you can maintain it. And obviously, number 2 in our group, the Alien Avengers Vessel, who's in the top 11, which is very impressive as well, and hopefully can push into that top 10 in the upcoming weeks. Also had a very impressive score of 23.87. But as Nathan said, it's a long season, so a lot of changes will be obviously made in the top echelons of ranks. But hopefully, for the guys that are in our group, can really push forward and finish off. Or not finish off, but push into the season where push comes to shove with these really nitty-gritty trades that you have to make with the upgrades, that you can make the right calls and push your rank even higher. But until then, we'll catch you probably later in the week. We don't have this Thursday night crap anymore with this game, which makes our life hard to get content out. So just the regular Friday night game. So we'll probably have a Q&A session before that, which will make life easy because we'll have the teams fully out or mostly out by the Sunday finalisations. We'll have basically all teams out, which we have a nice discussion on when that comes out. But until then, we'll catch you for the Q&A pod.